Welcome to the Histories of Northamptonshire podcast series, and this episode number 93. Recorded on location, each episode tells the story of one of the many and varied objects which are the focus of the exhibition A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects. The exhibition runs at the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery between the 20th of September 2025 and February 2026. Selected by local individuals, heritage groups and the museum's own curators, each object tells a different story from the county's past. And so, to our guest for this episode.
I'm Brian Lewin. I'm a long-term Kettering Town football supporter.
And that is an important fact because you're now going to tell me what the object is that you've selected as a guest curator.
I am indeed. My object is a football shirt, and it commemorates an event, so it's both an object and an event. In the early 1970s, there was no football sponsorship on shirts. A club in South America carried a sponsorship. A club in Germany did, but in the UK, there was no shirt sponsorship.
And Kettering Town broke that particular mould and were the first to do so.
They were indeed. In January 1976, which neatly coincides with the exhibition, it'll be the 50th anniversary, our chief executive, who was also the manager, Derek Dugan, who was a Northern Ireland international and a bit of an entrepreneur, contacted a Wellingborough firm, actually, called Kettering Tyres. And in a game against Bath City in January 1976, Kettering players ran out wearing a shirt which bore the name Kettering Tyres. And that's my object.
What was the reaction when the team ran out bearing a sponsor name on their chests?
I'm not sure whether there'd been any advance publicity. And if I'm being perfectly honest, although I was there on that day, I don't think there was a massive reaction from the crowd. The biggest reaction, you might anticipate, came from the Football Association, who were appalled. It breached their so-called rules, although I think their rules were a little ambiguous, to say the least. So much so that Kettering Town Football Club thought it better maybe to curtail the use of Kettering Tyres on their shirts, and for a couple of games wore KT as opposed to Kettering Tyres, but the FA didn't like that either.
So they were told, get rid of the sponsors? Well, I mean, what did that do to the club? Because presumably money had changed hands.
Yes, it wasn't a great deal of money, and I've done some research, and the payment was apparently in the region of £2,500, so fairly minuscule by today's standards. The end of the story was that Kettering and other clubs pressured the FA. The FA saw that there were commercial opportunities, and the following year the FA did permit shirt sponsorship, although it did take quite a number of years, in fact till 1984, before the FA allowed the FA Cup finalists to wear shirts.
So £2,500 now, in today's terms, is millions of pounds for most of the Premiership clubs and indeed further down the leagues too.
You're absolutely right. The top four clubs in the Premier are receiving in excess of £50 million for their shirt sponsorship. But I like to emphasise that Kettering's initiative also benefits grassroots football. If you went on a Sunday morning to your local park, it wouldn't be uncommon to see Sunday morning teams with shirt sponsorship, youth teams with shirt sponsorship. It's had a major effect on football.
You were there on the day. You say that the crowd didn't really pick up on the fact that there was a sponsor name, and of course the crowd would have been viewing from some way away. Those shirts, though, and the shirt that we have in the exhibition, those must be highly prized mementos now. So what happened to the team's shirts?
That's a really, really good question. My object is actually a replica shirt. I've tried very hard to locate an original shirt. I've spoke to a number of ex-players. I've spoke to the club. As far as I'm aware, they don't exist. I'm sure if there were shirts in existence, they have a uniqueness and they have a certain value. So I think they would have come to fore before now.
What was the strip in those days? What colours did Kettering play in?
Kettering played in predominantly red, white sleeves and a black stripe down the sleeve. So we are the Reds.
Now, this must have been very good news for Kettering Tyres. What did it do to their business to be the shirt sponsors? Do we know?
Again, a very good question, and I have no idea. It came as a surprise to me that they were actually a Wellingborough-based firm. Derek Dugan, I think, had made contact with one of the directors previously. It was a one-off deal, and what it did for their business, I have no idea.
What did this do for the fans? What was the significance of having the sponsorship, having a certain amount of notoriety with the FA, and then ultimately the sponsorship came back? Was that a source of pride to fans of the club? Is it still a source of pride?
Well, I think it's a truism that there's no such thing as bad publicity. So I think it certainly put Kettering on the map. Derek Dugan was a self-publicist. He didn't shy away from the media. I think it increased the pride of Kettering supporters towards the club and the team.
And what did it do to the team on the field?
That's mixed results. My memory is mixed results.
Do you think that Kettering Town had a certain position within the FA from the fans' perspective? Maybe not from the organisation, which didn't like the idea of sponsorship because it might have changed the game, and perhaps we'll talk about that in a moment or two. But what did this do for Kettering Town as a football club? Did it make it more attractive to players, to management, to the fans themselves?
I can't answer that from the club's point of view, but I think it certainly emphasised the position that we weren't just another club. It was a club that was prepared to do something innovative, something a bit different. And I suppose with the publicity, it did mean that players were more attractive to join Kettering.
And what about football as it was in 1976? On that day, were you conscious that perhaps football was turning a corner? We've seen rugby go from being the amateur sport that it was to being the very professional sport that it is. Formula One is now based on hundreds of millions of pounds per team. Football has now largely gone the same way, and a lot of it on sponsorship money. Was Kettering what broke the mould and opened the floodgates to that?
Both of those phrases are absolutely right. They did break the mould. It did open the floodgates. But I don't think anyone who attended that game that day could have possibly envisaged what was going to happen in years to come, in 50 years to come.
This exhibition is telling the histories of Northamptonshire. You've talked about Kettering Town Football Club being sponsored by supposedly a Kettering company, which was actually based in Wellingborough. What do you think that this innovation in funding sport at grassroots level, what does that say about Northamptonshire?
I think an aspect of Northamptonshire sport, we've got a lot of good sports in events. We've got the Saints, the Cobblers, we've got Silverstone. We've got a number of different sports in this relatively small county. And I think it really put us on the map. I do. I really think Kettering's initiative put the county on the map.
Brian, you've got a quote there that was used because you mentioned that it's 50 years of the sponsorship of the team, which will have happened by the time the exhibition comes to an end. What was that quote from the FA? Because they realised the writing was on the wall, didn't they?
Well, it's from the Northamptonshire Football Association, the local football association. It was on the 40th anniversary of the initiative, and the chief executive officer of the NFA, who happened to be an ex-Kettering goalkeeper, said, "It's fantastic to be able to credit such a momentous event in the history of football in the UK to a club in Northamptonshire." And I think that's a really important quote.
Brian, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Thank you for telling us about the shirt. If anybody has one of the original shirts, Brian would be very pleased to talk to you from the perspective of maybe taking it into his custody. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for listening to this Histories of Northamptonshire podcast. If you would like to find out more about the objects or listen to other episodes in the series, go to www.northamptonmuseums.com. Alternatively, you can visit the Northampton Museum and Art Gallery, where you can see the A History of Northamptonshire in 100 Objects exhibition for yourself. The Histories of Northamptonshire project is funded by Arts Council England as part of the National Portfolio Programme.